I would like to visit 1 Corinthians 7 and talk about a little bit what Paul would be, talking about. This is when Paul is, talking to, people that are worshiping pagan gods. And there's like pagan, gods, everywhere. And they're, defiling themselves with the wrong version of marriage and the wrong version of sexual relationship. But we both know that you're only supposed to have a sexual relationship with a man getting married to a woman, not outside of marriage, right? So not only they doing sexual relation practices outside of marriage, but they're also doing the wrong version. And so here you have Paul, and I'm kind of, getting a brief before I actually start, kind of getting you, kind of up to date on what is going on. So Paul is saying, obviously in verse 2, he's talking about there's much sexual immorality, and he's saying, basically what he's saying here is, when you go up to verse 1, you can see where he's talking about sexual sin. So then he, goes on to say, each husband and wife should, give themselves to each other. And yes, he would be talking about sex, right? He would be talking about sex, mainly about that. But marriage, we know, isn't necessarily all about sex. So what other ways could a husband and wife give themselves, to each other? Like, what other ways can a husband and wife, spend time together and things like that? That's really what Paul is, because yes, he is talking about, sex with husband and wife, but, to go further, to, go deeper, kind of, there's other ways that a husband can give himself to his wife, and there are other things, and I don't have to go down a list of those things for you to know what those things are, so I'm not going to do that. But there are other things that a wife can do to give herself to her husband, and then likewise the husband can do the same. But here in 5 it says, do not deprive each other from sexual relations. Let me stop right there. Yes, again, Paul is talking about sex, because it clearly says deprive each other of sexual relations. Do not deprive. So he's talking about a husband and wife. Don't deprive. Hey, women, wives out there, don't deprive your husbands of sex. But men, don't do the same. You should want to have sexual relations with your spouse. A husband should desire to have a sexual relation with his wife. Women, you should desire to have a sexual relation with your husband. So that's the first thing that he's talking about. But let me take it further. Like I said earlier, let's take this further. What other things can a wife, so let's just do this. Do not deprive each other of your time with one another. See, you can almost say that he's, the reason why he uses sexual relations is because that's what he's talking about. Because you go back into verse 1, he brings up sexual relations right there. They're doing unsafe, unclean sexual relations, forbidden sexual relations. And so he's saying, you need to stop that. But what you need to do is a man needs to take a wife, a woman needs to take a husband, and they need to fulfill each other's sexual needs. Because he's talking straight to the sexual sins that they're doing. That's the reason why you see him talking about sexual relations here in 5. Do not deprive each other of sexual relations. However, you can almost say, do not deprive each other of your time, together, and, so on and so forth. Going on, unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy. So again, because he's talking about sexual sin and sexual relations. This is why he says sexual intimacy. So here you can almost say, unless you both agree to refrain from intimacy, or both refrain from, for a limited time, so you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. This is very important, what he's saying right here. For a limited time, so you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. So what he's saying is for husband and wives, you should have a secret place to go off to your secret place and pray to the Lord. Right? Then listen to what he says afterward. Afterward, let me repeat that so you understand. Afterward, you should come together again so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So, the only thing that Paul mentions is the only time for a husband and wife to, be separate is really through prayer, going to their secret place. Now, I would argue that in today's time there are a few other things, other than that. But really, other than going off to your husband going to his secret place and a wife going to her secret place to pray and maybe a few other things, really, a husband and wife should really be giving themselves to each other, so that Satan doesn't come in and tempt a husband and wife. So really what Paul is saying is a husband and wife need to spend time together. Like, they really need to spend time together. Now, yes, you do need to spend some time apart, but if you are spending more time apart than you are together, you're not really, Satan is easily tempting you. He's putting thoughts into your mind. He's doing this, he's doing that. He's coming in between your marriage, and this is why I would be against the churches that are doing women's this and men's this, women's this and men's this. So let me break this down for you, because I know that many women, probably, even men today, are probably going to get upset about what I just said. Let me break this down. See, it's not for the church, definitely not for the church to separate men and women. See, when you have a woman's retreat or a woman's conference, you're separating the husband and wife. Did you catch that? All the churches that are doing that, at that time they are separating. And a retreat is for a weekend, and a conference is for the whole entire day. That's not really what Paul is talking about. That's too much time apart. That's too much time apart. Well, but we're still talking about the gospel. We're still talking about the gospel. People are still getting saved. Well, guess what I'm going to say to you? God can take what the enemy has meant for bad and turn it around for his glory. See, that is what's happening. See, Lucifer, Satan, is using women's conferences and women's retreats, men's conferences, men's retreats inside the churches to separate the marriage. And the reason why people are still getting saved is because God has turned it around for his glory. I mean, that's the only reason why you would still get people that are being saved. But really, it's not healthy for the church to be doing that. It's not healthy for the marriages to be separated for that long. Because yes, every marriage, there needs to be time spent apart, but we're talking about like either an entire weekend or an entire day. And see, in marriage, a husband and wife, a lot of the times they're stronger together. So when they pray, they're stronger praying together. Now, yes, you want to still have time to go off and be alone with God. So that's why a husband and wife need to have a secret place where they go off into their secret place, right? But then they need to come back together. See, a secret place, you're alone with God for maybe an hour, maybe 2, maybe even 3. But then you come together. You come back together. And so, really, it's not healthy for the church to be doing that. Because the church that does that now, I mean, just look at how much time a husband and wife are separated. But then also, I can make the argument also, it's also not healthy for the church to do that. Why? Because the gospel is for everybody. See? And yet, the churches can argue, well, it's still for everybody. We're still making it available for everybody. We have women's conferences and we have men's conferences. It's still, well, okay, but then I'll circle back to how the marriages are being separate and how whenever there's a women's conference, men are not there. Men, like every time that you have a women's conference, men are not getting the gospel. And every time you have a men's conference, women are not getting the gospel. See, when you have a conference for the entire church, when you have a conference for both male and female attendance, that's when both male and female are receiving the gospel. So, and if the gospel is for everyone, retreats and conferences that the church does needs to be for both male and female. There needs to be a retreat for just retreat for the entire church, and a conference for the entire church, not separate, And another quick fact is, in the pagan worship, there was places of worship where only women went to go worship. And there were places for men where only men went to go worship inside the pagan belief, the pagan gods. And so that's another thing that I along with. And you can be like, well, but we're not teaching, paganism. We're preaching the gospel. Well, again, what did I say earlier? It's just something that Lucifer and Satan wanted to use, has been trying to use, to get the husband and wife separated, to be separated more than they would be together, so that he can come in between those marriages inside the church. But God has turned it around and used it for His glory. So yes, God has turned that around for His glory, but do you see where it was first Satan's plan? And if it was first Satan's plan, that's all that Satan really cares about. He doesn't technically, he can be like, well, they're still preaching the gospel, but I still have them, separated. I still have the marriages, separating themselves more than they are together. So in a way, the churches right now, they are doing Satan a favor. And I just want the churches to think about that. Really think about that. And also think about this. You're also doing somebody that would be a lesbian a favor. You're doing a lesbian couple a favor. Because, how is it that a lesbian couple can go to a conference, a woman's conference together, but anybody inside the church that's not a, lesbian couple, their marriage, they have to be separated for that time. Same thing with the men's conference. The people that would be gay inside that church, well, they can be together during that conference. Why can't a woman, a wife, be with her husband? It's only a conference for men. And yes, you could be like, well, but watch, the gays and the lesbians are going to get saved. Well, that could be true, right? That could be true. However, don't you see, again, how Satan is separating the marriages within the church? And then lastly, my last argument to this is there's a lot of churches that will say that we got lots of single men and single women. Well, I wonder why. I truly wonder why. When you look at all the women's conferences and men's conferences and women's retreats and men's retreats, when you look at all of that, when you look at all the men's breakfasts and the women's worship, men's prayer night, women's prayer night, like, when you look at all of that, and in fact, there's, I'm not going to name the church, but there's a church that I've been going online, attending, online, and they are having a women's graduation. A woman's graduation. Okay, the last time that I mean, I'll just say this, or I'll just ask this question. Isn't a graduation for everybody? I mean, how's come you have to have a woman's graduation? That just is very, very silly when you really actually think about it. It's really silly because graduation is for everyone. And so that's that. And so I say all of this to this is my final statement, is no wonder why there is so many single men and single women in the church. Maybe that's also part of Lucifer's plan. Is so if he can get the church to have women's conferences, women's this, women's that, women's this, women's this, women's this, men's this, men's this, men's this, well, when is it time for the singles to come together and meet? Because, I mean, when you have so many women's this and so many men's this, there's no time for those who are single. Is a man of God going to find a wife? Going to find a woman in a men's conference? No. Sounds like another thing that Lucifer could be doing. Is a woman going to find a man in a woman's retreat? No. Well, I guess it's probably another thing that Lucifer is doing. Like, church, wake up. I mean, how is it that we are now living in a time where it's okay for the homosexual community to have relationships and do this and do that together, but the church, oh, we can't be together. We can't do, we can't have this event together. We can't have conferences together. We can't do this together. Like, come on. wake up.